Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
The first thing you should probably know is that I never asked for much from my family, never wanted the spotlight, never needed the applause, never begged to be understood. I just wanted a little bit of peace and maybe, once in a while, a simple thank you. But in the Patterson house, growing up in Ohio, that kind of thing didn't come easy. My parents were honest, worn-down people, the kind who poured coffee into thermoses before dawn and didn't come home until the streetlights were buzzing. My dad worked construction until his knees gave out, and my mom cleaned houses like her life depended on it, because it did. And in that chaos of bills and busted appliances, there were two kids, me, Lena, the one who kept her head down, and Danny, the golden boy who seemed to float through life like a balloon someone else kept from drifting too far. Danny was 4 years younger, blonde-haired and blue-eyed like some damn catalog kid, and he always had that gleam in his eye like he knew the world owed him something and all he had to do was wait for it to arrive on a silver plate. My dad used to say, "He's got big dreams, that one." You'll see. I did see. I saw every time he failed and someone else cleaned up the mess. Mostly me. When he dropped out of his second college, I co-signed the lease on his startup office because he swore this app would revolutionize home cleaning. When that flopped, I paid off the last 4 months' rent because the landlord threatened to sue. But nobody talked about that at Thanksgiving. No, they talked about how brave Danny was for going for it. Meanwhile, I built myself a quiet life. No kids. No husband. Not for lack of trying, just for lack of patience, I guess. I got into real estate early, flipped a couple properties, and learned the math behind bad decisions. I didn't wear fancy jewelry or post vacation photos. I saved. I invested. I did the grown-up thing when no one was watching. I'd send birthday gifts for my nieces, sometimes pay for repairs on mom's house without signing the check. Danny once told me I had a cold generosity. Like I gave, but never smiled about it. I guess that's fair. Smiling got me nowhere with them. So when the family Zoom invite came for the pre-Christmas check-in, I clicked in right on time, just like always. Everyone was there, Mom, Aunt Joe, Danny, and his perfect little nuclear setup with Carly and the 2 girls. Danny had that swagger in his voice, that salesman pitch he always used when he was trying to impress people who already liked him. He was walking around their new place in Florida, talking about how the backyard pool was heated and how the school his girls were going to was one of the top 10 in the state. I didn't say much, just nodded, sipped my wine and waited for it to be over. But then he said it. Right as Mom was asking if I'd be flying in this year. Danny said, "Actually, Mom, I was thinking maybe this Christmas we keep it more selective. I mean, only winners deserve a seat at the table, right?" Then he laughed, like it was some kind of joke. But nobody else really laughed, except his wife, who let out that thin little giggle people use when they know it's not funny but want to seem loyal. I looked right at him, right into the camera, and I said nothing for a good 10 seconds. Just breathed. Then I said, "All right." That was it. That one word felt like slamming a door without touching a thing. He shrugged. The conversation rolled on. Mom asked about my garden, someone changed the topic to flight delays, and just like that, I was muted in every way that mattered. I logged off early, said I had a work call. But instead, I walked into my office and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a brown leather-bound ledger, old school, with handwritten notes and color-coded tabs. Each one marked a year, and under each year rows of payments. Rent, tuition, repairs, loans, gas money, and always his name. Danny Patterson. I ran my fingers down the list and felt something strange in my chest, not rage, not even sadness. Just clarity. Like I'd been underwater for years, and someone finally pulled me up to breathe. Funny thing is, he was right. Only winners deserve a seat at the table. I just realized too late that I was the one who bought the damn table and served the meal and somehow still ended up standing. But not this time. Not again. People like to think generosity is a one-time thing, like you hold the door open, you write a check, you help once and feel good about it and move on. But that's not what it is, at least not in my life, not in the version I lived. Where generosity turned into habit, habit turned into expectation, and expectation eventually twisted into resentment so thick I couldn't swallow it anymore without choking. It didn't start out that way, of course. It started with me doing what older sisters do, what quiet, capable women always end up doing in families like mine. We patch holes while pretending we don't notice the leaks, and we cover bills with a smile so no one asks how deep the overdraft really goes. The first time I helped Danny, it felt like an act of love. The last time I helped him, it felt like theft. It began with his first big vision, which, in retrospect, was less of a vision and more of a desperate attempt to play entrepreneur. He was 24, freshly fired from a retail job where he showed up late more often than not, but convinced, absolutely certain, that he was destined to run his own business. He wanted to open a multi-purpose creative space, whatever the hell that meant, in a rundown strip mall on the edge of Columbus. I still remember standing outside that office with him beaming with pride, showing me a faded "Available Now" sign like it was a golden ticket, while I tried to calculate whether the roof could withstand another Ohio winter. The lease was $1,500 a month, which was laughable considering he had maybe 200 to his name and a credit score lower than the winter temperature. So, I signed the lease, paid the deposit, co-signed the utilities. Didn't say a word to our parents, just told them Danny was doing well when they asked. 6 months later, he bailed on the space, said the foot traffic wasn't right, said the market was shifting, whatever that meant, and left behind a stack of unpaid invoices and an eviction notice that I swallowed whole because his name wasn't the only one on the dotted line. Still, I didn't stop. When he told me he needed a decent car to look the part for investor meetings, I helped him buy a used Audi, even though I knew damn well it was more for show than necessity. I paid half up front, told him to cover the rest in installments. He never did. When his girls were born, I started sending money directly: birthday presents, holiday outfits, preschool deposits. Not because they asked, but because I wanted those girls to have something stable, something soft. I didn't blame them for their father's bullshit. The house was the big one, the real kick in the ribs that still makes my jaw clench. Danny and Carly were renting a cramped 2-bedroom, complaining about mold and noisy neighbors, and suddenly there was this miracle opportunity, a friend of a friend selling a 4-bedroom in a good school district for a steal. But they needed help with the down payment, just a little. Just enough to make the numbers work. I wired $30,000 that same week. $30,000. I told myself I was doing it for the kids. Told myself they needed space. Told myself it wasn't charity, it was investment. But you know what? I lied. I did it because that's what I'd always done: solve Danny's problems before they reached crisis level. And in return, he sent me thank you texts with emojis and exclamation points like he was 12 years old, and this was Monopoly money. The one thing that still makes me sick to my stomach, though, was the education fund. That one wasn't even his idea, it was mine. I suggested we set up something formal when the girls were still toddlers, something to guarantee they'd have access to private school or college without the constant scramble. I matched him, dollar for dollar, or at least that's what I told him. In reality, I paid 70% of it. Wait, no. $900 out of $1,000 monthly. That's actually 80% now that I think about it. Whatever, you get it. I handled the accounts, made the transfers, never missed a month even when the markets tanked and I had to dip into my own reserves. Carly thought it was an inheritance from Danny's late uncle, some long-forgotten savings plan that just showed up like a fairy godmother in financial form. Danny never corrected her. I let them believe it because, honestly, it was easier than explaining. Explaining would mean pulling back the curtain and showing them just how many strings I was holding, how many safety nets I had quietly woven underneath their feet. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want them to see me like that, not generous, not kind, but necessary. Because if they saw how essential I'd become, They might start treating me like a person instead of a wallet. And that scared me more than anything. So when the call came from the school administrator that Monday morning, I wasn't surprised. She was polite, of course, one of those overly cheerful women who's probably been through 3 divorces, but still says have a blessed day like she means it. She just wanted to confirm the next semester's tuition payment, said it was due soon, asked if I wanted to keep the auto draft in place or make changes. I paused. Just for a second. Long enough to feel the moment crack open like a fault line under my feet. I said, I'll get back to you. And this time, I meant it. There's a kind of silence that doesn't scream, doesn't tremble, doesn't boil over, it just sharpens. It sits inside your chest like a blade you forgot you were holding, and then one morning, it moves. That's what it felt like for me the day after that call from the school. I sat at my desk, hands flat on the oak, looking out over the backyard where everything was frozen in place, and I decided I was done. Not angry, not hurt, just done. There's a difference between rage and resolve, and people like Danny never learn to tell them apart, because they only recognize emotion when it comes with volume. But me? I don't yell. I don't throw things. I just act. I opened the browser and logged into the education account first, the one labeled Patterson Family Fund, which, now that I think of it, should have been labeled Lena's personal guilt account. The school had their payments set up on auto draft, nice and clean, $1,000 a month for both girls, pulling like clockwork from the checking account I'd set up in my name. Though I let Danny add his initials to the online statements so he could print them and pretend they were coming from him. I clicked cancel. Just like that. One stroke of a pen, or in this case, one click of a button, and the silence in my chest grew quieter. Next, I called the bank, the one that held the trust account I'd quietly opened 6 years ago when Danny and Carly first started talking about long-term security. He told me he wanted to be the kind of father who leaves something behind, and I believed him, because back then I still believed he had it in him to grow the hell up. I'd seeded the account with $15,000 of my own money, and Danny matched it with $5,000 he borrowed from our mother and never repaid. I had it structured so that neither of them could withdraw without my approval, but I never told them that. I just kept funding it, feeding it like a loyal little squirrel hiding nuts for winter. I told the bank to freeze the account indefinitely. They asked if I wanted to notify the other beneficiaries. I said no. Let them find out the hard way. After that, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, sat back down, and wrote the email. No fluff. No bitterness. Just precision. Danny, per your request, I'm stepping away from any contributions. Best of luck at the table. Lena, I stared at the screen for a full minute before hitting send. Not because I was unsure, but because I knew exactly what it meant. That email wasn't a message, it was a match. And I had just tossed it onto a haystack soaked in gasoline. He didn't reply. Of course he didn't. That's not his style. Danny doesn't handle things. He lets them build until someone else panics first. It took 2 days before I heard anything, and when I did, it wasn't from him. It was Carly, calling me in a tone I'd never heard from her before, half sob, half accusation. She started without even saying hello. The school called. They said we're behind. They said the payment for January didn't go through. You've always handled it. What's going on? I listened. I let her talk. Then, very calmly, I said, it's Danny's table now. Let him handle it. There was a pause on the other end. The kind of pause where you know the person is blinking so hard they're probably seeing stars. She hung up without another word. That evening, my phone rang again. This time it was Danny. I didn't answer. He called twice more, then texted, pick up. Now. I waited an hour before I did. He didn't even let me say hello. What the hell is wrong with you? He spat. Do you hate my kids that much? You don't think they deserve school anymore? You're punishing them for something they didn't do. I took a breath, leaned back in my chair, looked up at the ceiling like I could find patience in the drywall. No, Danny, I said slowly. I just stopped pretending. What does that even mean? He snapped. You said you'd always be there for them. For me. No, I corrected, I was always there. That's the problem. I should have let you fall 10 years ago, but I kept patching you up, kept bailing you out, kept pretending you were a father and a provider, and not just some overgrown kid playing dress-up with other people's money. He was quiet for a second, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, something had landed. But no, of course not. The next words out of his mouth were exactly what I expected. You touch anything else, I swear I'll come after you legally. I laughed then. Not loud, not cruel. Just one of those low, tired laughs that comes out when you realize the person you're dealing with is never going to surprise you again. Go ahead, I said. You want to open that door, Danny? You might want to read the fine print on the trust account first. Or maybe revisit the lease agreement on your office space. You know, the one with my name under yours. Silence again. Not the good kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that means something is shifting, breaking, loading itself up like a slingshot pulled tight. I'll talk to my lawyer, he finally muttered. Yeah, I said. You do that. I ended the call and stood up, feeling taller than I had in years. Not vindicated. Not triumphant. Just finally free of the weight I'd carried so long I forgot it wasn't part of my body. And as I walked to the kitchen, poured myself another cup of coffee, and looked out over the frozen yard, I realized something simple but profound. Some bridges aren't meant to be burned. Some were never real to begin with. There's a kind of quiet power that comes from knowing exactly which strings to cut and precisely when to let the whole show fall apart, and that kind of power only belongs to someone who's been holding the ropes for far too long without applause, without thanks, and without anyone even noticing the blisters. I had spent over a decade quietly reinforcing the shaky scaffolding that Danny called his career, plugging every leak, softening every fall, and smiling through every ridiculous promise he made to the world about being self-made, about being a leader, about being anything other than a carefully disguised parasite with a press-on smile. The thing about building someone else's empire is this: eventually, they start to believe they did it all by themselves, and worse, they start to resent you for being part of the foundation. But empires built on borrowed backs and borrowed money don't last, not when the lender stops playing dead. Danny's latest stunt, the one he'd been bragging about in family chats and posting all over social media like he was some mogul, was a co-working space he opened in a mid-tier business district about 20 minutes outside Tampa. He called it Launch Lab, like he was trying to bottle the energy of Silicon Valley, but forgot to pay for the label. It wasn't a bad idea, honestly. The location was decent, the market for remote workers was strong, and with the right management, he might have even made it work. But Danny never had patience for systems. He loved launch, hated maintenance. So, when he came to me last year, asking for help with the loan paperwork, he dressed it up in language I was too tired to resist. I just need someone who believes in me, Lena, he'd said, standing in my kitchen, holding his stupid baseball cap in both hands like some extra from a Hallmark movie. Just until I get the first round of funding. I'll make you proud. I signed it. Of course I did. I went with him to the bank, co-signed the commercial loan for $225,000, and I even negotiated the terms myself, terms that gave me the option to call the debt early if the payments fell more than 90 days behind. At the time, I told myself it was just insurance. Now I realize I was building a trap, quietly and unintentionally, out of my own exhaustion. He made a few payments on time, maybe 3, and then started slipping little delays, excuses, miscommunications. Twice I got notices from the bank, and twice I wired the difference myself, just to keep the wolves off his porch. I didn't even mention it. I didn't want the fight. I just wanted him to grow up. But now? Now I wasn't interested in protection anymore. Now I wanted consequences. I called the bank, asked for the loan manager by name, and calmly requested to activate the early call clause. They were surprised. People don't usually request to call in their own loans, but they honored the contract. I asked them to send the demand letter directly to Danny's registered business address. No warning. No heads up. Let the empire feel the tremor from the ground up. Within 48 hours, everything started unraveling. His business partners, two guys I'd only ever heard about through Christmas cards and secondhand stories, backed out of a pending deal after hearing about the sudden call-in. Investors got spooked, stopped returning calls. One of them emailed me directly, asking if I could clarify the financial status of Launch Lab. I didn't reply. Let them draw their own conclusions from the silence. Danny, of course, called again. This time, his voice wasn't angry. It was terrified. "What are you doing?" he asked, breathless like he'd run up a flight of stairs. "You're ruining my life." I held the phone to my ear and looked out over the lawn, watching the wind whip dead leaves into small spirals. I said, slowly and clearly, "You ruined it the day you built your life on my back and pretended you were flying." He said nothing for a while. Just breathing. You can always tell when someone is about to panic because they go very, very still, like a deer realizing it's already in the headlights and too late to run. "You think you're teaching me a lesson?" he finally said. "You think this is some moral victory? You're not hurting me. You're hurting the girls." That's when the temperature in my chest dropped 10 degrees. Because there it was, the old trick. The shift. The blame. He always knew how to twist the knife toward guilt. I stayed silent. "If you don't stop this, if you keep going," he said, his voice shaking now, "I'll take them and disappear. You'll never see them again. Ever." My grip on the phone tightened, but I didn't flinch. Because when someone threatens to disappear, what they're really saying is they've run out of lies and need one last explosion to cover their exit. It wasn't about the kids. It was never about the kids. It was about control. And he knew deep down, under all that cheap charm and hollow ego, that I wasn't bluffing anymore. He was the one who built his empire on sand, and now the tide was rolling in. And I was done holding back the waves. The truth is, there are wounds that never bleed, never scab, never scream for attention, and those are the ones that quietly rot inside you, layer by layer, until one day something brushes against them, soft as breath, and you feel everything tear open all at once. For me, that wound had a name, and it wasn't Danny, it was our father. And the day he died, something inside me was taken I'll never get back, not because death stole it, but because my own brother held the door shut and made sure I missed the moment. That's the thing I never said out loud to anyone, not even myself really, until the silence inside me turned into rage too thick to swallow. It was 3 years ago when Dad landed in the hospital after that second heart attack, the big one, the one we all knew might be the last. I was on a work trip in Chicago, already trying to move flights when the call came in. Danny told me not to bother. I remember it like it was recorded in stone. He said, "Don't come, Lena. You know how stressed you make everyone. He doesn't need that right now." Just like that. No room for debate. No offer to wait. I don't know if Dad asked for me. I'll never know if he held out hope I'd show up. But what I do know, what I know with a bitter kind of certainty, is that Danny made sure I didn't get the chance to say goodbye. And yet, I kept showing up. I kept funding his life. Kept writing the checks and making the calls and being the safety net for a man who stole my last moment with the only parent who ever saw me. Why? I think maybe I believed that by helping him, I was keeping a part of Dad alive, like maybe I could rewrite the ending by playing the hero one more time. But grief doesn't work like that, and neither does guilt. You can't drown pain with kindness when the one you're trying to forgive still holds the knife. So this week, I finally let it all go. I met with my lawyer. Not the family one Danny knew, not the smiling golf club type we'd both used in the past. I hired someone new, young, sharp, and meticulous as a surgeon. We sat down, went over every account, every contract, every line item with my name on it. I revoked every co-signature, closed every joint fund, pulled out of the LLC connected to his co-working venture, and made it crystal clear: no financial ties, no lingering obligations, no more leverage. I told her to draft a statement of severance, a kind of legal obituary for the role I'd played in Danny's life. She said she'd never seen something like it. I told her that's because most people die before they get free. Later that night, the messages started flooding in. First the short ones. Wow. Really? Unbelievable. Then they got meaner. You think you're better than us now? The girls will hate you for this. I hope Dad's proud of what you've become. And then the big one. The one meant to rattle me. I'll go to the press, he wrote. I'll say you abused the system. That you faked financial hardship to hide assets. That you used those girls' names for tax sheltering. You'll go down with me. I stared at the screen for a while before responding. Not out of fear, just disappointment. I'd hoped he had enough sense to go quiet. To lick his wounds. But of course not. A man like Danny doesn't go down without trying to bring the walls down too. So I wrote back, go ahead. I'll show them the receipts. And the tuition statements. And your text from 2019 where you thanked me for saving your house from foreclosure. I'll even throw in the screenshots of Carly's messages when she asked me to pay the school nurse's bill because your credit cards were maxed. Do you want that smoke, Danny? He didn't reply. Not right away. Not until Christmas morning, actually, but I'll get to that. That morning, I woke up to silence. No chaos. No family calls. No noise. Just me, my coffee, the dog snoring on the couch, and a thin blanket of snow outside that made the world look clean and forgiving. I set the table with care, out of habit more than anything else. A plate. A fork. A cloth napkin folded just right. Then 2 more chairs, both empty. One for Dad. One for whoever I used to be when I thought loyalty meant silence. I lit a single candle. Let it burn low. Ate my breakfast slow. No music. No TV. Just the steady hum of nothing, the kind that doesn't ache, it just is. Peaceful in a way grief never allowed before. I sat there long after the food was gone, my hands resting on the wood, the flame flickering low in the glass. And I whispered, not loud, not for drama, just to hear it spoken into air. Some seats aren't meant to be filled. And some people never deserve them. Then the phone buzzed. One text. Short. From Carly. Can we talk? I didn't know. And just like that, the silence wasn't so clean anymore. It had a shape. A weight. And a future.